Imagine being told that human rights, individual freedom, and the pursuit of happiness aren't actually the pinnacle of human achievement.
Right. That there's something entirely different.
Yeah. Imagine being told that they are, in fact, a strategic weapon, like a vulnerability that was intentionally designed to destroy your country from the inside out.
It's a completely upside down way of looking at the world, for most of us anyway.
It really is. And today, we are looking at a master blueprint that claims exactly that. You know, usually when we talk about a blueprint with you, there is this expectation of clean engineering.
Oh, absolutely. Like load-bearing walls, structural physics.
Right, exactly. You want to build a skyscraper, you look at the math. Will it stand or will it fall? It's comforting because, well, we like things to obey the laws of gravity.
We like predictability.
We do. But when you step into the world of geopolitical engineering, that blueprint isn't for a building. It's for reality itself.
And that is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. But, it is incredibly revealing if you know how to read the plans.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at something truly fascinating with you. We've got our hands on a highly analytical, incredibly dense 14-slide presentation dossier.
It's titled simply Perpetual War Architecture.pdf.
Such a cheerful title, right? And our mission today is very specific. We are going to decode the rhetoric of the Russian elite by unpacking the frameworks inside this dossier.
We want to understand not just what is being said, but the underlying structural models that make those words so effective.
But before we dive in, we really need to set a ground rule for this deep dive right up front.
Yes, this is crucial. You and I aren't here to play politics, take sides, or defend Western or Russian ideologies.
Not at all.
We are acting as neutral mechanics today because this dossier touches on intensely geopolitical and, frankly, heavily charged themes involving both democratic and autocratic systems.
Someone essentially handed us the blueprints to a very dangerous engine.
Exactly. And we are just putting it up on the lift, taking it apart piece by piece, and showing you, the listener, how the pistons fire.
We are neutrally imparting the ideas and frameworks contained strictly within the source material without endorsing any of them. We are just the mechanics.
Entirely impartial mechanics today. And to analyze this engine, the dossier actually uses two fascinating analytical lenses.
Right, which are super unique.
Yeah, the first is spiral dynamics, which is this complex psychological theory of human and societal development.
And the second lens.
The second is George Orwell's classic dystopian novel, 1984.
So we're merging a developmental theory with 20th century dystopian fiction to analyze 21st century statecraft.
It's a very bold approach, yeah.
It is. So let's just get right into the document. Slide 1 shows an illustration, and it's a glowing, high-tech radar sweep overlaying a very dark, digitized map of Eurasia.
It looks very intense.
Yeah, it looks like something straight out of a military command center. A sweeping arc of light, actively scanning the continent, searching for threats or targets. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, that visual immediately sets a deliberate tone. It communicates active surveillance and strategic targeting right off the bat.
It definitely feels like you're in a bunker.
Right. But more importantly, it introduces the three specific subjects of our dossier.
Right.
We aren't looking at generic, run-of-the-mill state propaganda here.
No, this is highly specific.
We are looking at the specific frameworks of three men: Alexander Dugin, Andrei Bezrukov, and Konstantin Melifev.
And we should clarify for the listener, these aren't just like random pundits shouting on a late-night talk show, right?
Oh, far from it. These are key architects of a very specific ideological framework.
So who are they exactly?
Well, Alexander Dugin is often described as a philosopher or a hardline ideologue. Andrei Bezrukov is actually a former deep-cover intelligence operative.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he spent decades in the West and is now a strategic thinker. And then you have Konstantin Melifev, who is a powerful figure bridging the worlds of media, traditionalist ideology, and massive financial resources.
So these guys have real weight.
Absolutely. When these three men speak, they are not just reacting to the daily news cycle. They are actively attempting to construct the parameters of a new reality for their state.
They are designing the architecture.
They are.
Which brings us to the foundation of that architecture. Slide 2 shows an illustration, and it's titled The Civilizational Rheostat.
A rheostat, like something that controls the flow of current.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially a spider chart or, a radar graph that maps out and contrasts two completely different value systems.
Okay, what does it look like?
Well, you have these sharp red jagged peaks representing the Russian ideal. And the points on this red shape are reaching out toward values labeled patriotism, collectivism, mercy, and high moral ideals.
Got it. And what about the other side?
Then, overlaid on top of that is a blue dashed line representing the Western ideal. Its peaks stretch out in entirely different directions.
Towards what?
Toward life, human rights and freedoms, and dignity. They are physically, graphically misaligned on the chart.
What's fascinating here is the interpretation the dossier provides for this exact misalignment.
How so?
Well, it notes that the rejection of individual rights, those blue peaks of human rights and freedoms in favor of collectivism and patriotism, isn't viewed by these elites as merely a cultural difference.
It's not just, we like tea, you like coffee.
No, not at all. It's framed as a mandatory competitive advantage for the survival of the regime.
Okay, hold on, I have to push back there.
Go ahead.
Framing the rejection of human rights as a quote-unquote competitive advantage just sounds like a really convenient excuse for tyranny.
It does sound like that, yes.
Does the dossier actually explain how stripping people of rights makes a state stronger, or is it just like rhetorical cover for a dictatorship?
It absolutely explains the mechanics of it. From their perspective, if your state is engaged in a permanent existential conflict, human rights are a critical vulnerability.
Because they get in the way.
Because they introduce friction. Think about it. If a citizen has the right to protest, the right to a free press, the right to demand better wages instead of military spending.
The state has to deal with all that.
Right. The state expends massive amounts of energy managing that internal dissent.
I see.
By prioritizing collectivism, the state moves as one single impenetrable organism. Individualism is seen as a luxury that a nation under siege simply cannot afford.
That is a chillingly clinical way to look at human lives.
Well,
just seeing people as friction. And I noticed the word mercy on that red chart, positioned against justice or human rights on the blue chart.
that is a crucial linguistic distinction right there. Rights imply you are inherently owed something by the state. You demand your rights from the bottom up.
Right, I have a right to a fair trial.
Exactly. But mercy is dispensed from the top down. A sovereign, an autocrat, grants mercy. It maintains the power dynamic.
So you're constantly beholden to them.
Yes. You don't have a right to fairness. You receive mercy by the grace of the state. This chart is basically mapping the psychological groundwork for total, unquestionable authority.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for the tools the dossier uses to break this all down. Slide 3 shows an illustration, which is the dual analytical framework laid out visually.
This is where those two lenses come in.
Yeah, we have this brightly colored 3D spring on the left side, representing lens 1. Spiral dynamics. It coils upward through colors like red, blue, orange, and green.
And the right side.
On the right side, we have lens 2, which is this grim, heavy industrial gear housing a security camera right in the center. That's Orwell's 1984.
The contrast is pretty stark.
It is. I need you to explain this spring to me, though, because spiral dynamics sounds like a lot of academic jargon. Break it down for us.
I can absolutely do that. Spiral dynamics is basically a psychological model of how human societies evolve based on their life conditions.
Like how they level up over time.
Kind of, yeah. For our purposes, we just need to understand 4 colors on this spring. Imagine a society growing up.
Okay.
At the red stage, it's all about raw, impulsive, power-driven survivalism. Think warlords, tribal conquest, rule by the strongest.
Pure aggression and dominance.
Exactly. But eventually, a society gets tired of constant chaos, so it evolves up the spring to the blue stage.
What's blue?
Blue represents authoritarian, mythic order, absolute truth, and rigid hierarchy. It's law and order, usually dictated by a strong state or religion.
Everyone has a place, and obedience is paramount.
Right. So from warlords to a strict ordered kingdom.
Got it. And then they evolve again.
Yes. Then, as trade and science flourish, the society evolves to orange. Orange represents rational capitalist advancement, pluralism, and free markets.
Individual success matters more than rigid state obedience.
Exactly. And finally, you reach green, which represents empathy, human rights, environmentalism, and deep social pluralism.
So orange and green essentially represent the modern Western democratic model.
Yes, in this framework, they do.
So a society naturally evolves from red survival to blue order to orange free markets to green human rights. But the dossier suggests these Russian architects are doing the exact opposite.
Yes, Lens 1 is being used to analyze an intentional societal regression.
forcing them backward.
They are actively trying to shift society away from orange and green, forcing a structural collapse back down into the authoritarian blue order.
Why would anyone want to do that?
Because it's easier to control. And as we'll see, they do it by fueling the society with the raw survivalist energy of the red stage.
Wow. And then there's lens 2, the gear and the camera.
Orwell's 1984. This lens decodes the rhetoric meant to maintain total state control over reality.
How language is manipulated.
Exactly. It's about how language is manipulated to limit thought, how objective truth is erased, and how continuous warfare is used not to conquer a foreign enemy, but to control your own domestic population.
So to really understand how these two lenses, developmental regression and Orwellian control, actually apply in the real world, we need to look at the three specific architects who are proposing this reality.
We have to look at the blueprints they're drawing up.
Right. So if the goal is to force a society backward into authoritarianism, someone has to write the philosophical justification for that. And the dossier points to one specific architect for this.
Alexander Dugin.
Yes. Slide 4 shows an illustration focusing on Alexander Dugin. The visual here is a glowing blue hourglass. But instead of sand flowing from the top to the bottom, it's a digital stream.
A digital hourglass.
Yeah. At the top of the hourglass is a human brain, and it's pouring data down into a microchip at the bottom.
Dugin's section is titled The War for Reality. And that digital hourglass is a perfect metaphor because, for him, time is aggressively running out on an existential level.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What are his main points?
The dossier outlines 3 main points he makes to justify this new architecture. First is the tech deficit. He warns that there is a fatal technological lag compared to the West.
And he doesn't just see this as an economic hurdle, right?
No. He sees it as the primary threat to the regime's physical survival. If they fall behind in tech, they cease to exist.
Which leads to his second point, the AI paradigm. He argues that AI is displacing technical roles, but what is urgently needed isn't better coders, but human intellect to dictate the underlying paradigm of the AI.
Right.
He argues that philosophers and ideologues must dictate AI, not just technicians. Wait, I have to stop you there.
Sure, what's up?
How does an algorithm have a philosophy? Are we talking about fake news or something deeper? I mean, code is just code.
It is much, much deeper than fake news. We are talking about ontological warfare.
Ontological warfare. War over reality.
War over the nature of reality itself.
Yeah.
Think about how large language models work. They ingest massive amounts of data and formulate responses based on how that data is weighted.
Right. They learn from what we feed them.
Dugin is arguing that if you let Western technicians build the AI will naturally reflect orange and green values.
Like pluralism, individual rights, free inquiry.
Yes, it will optimize for those outcomes. Dugin says the Russian state must inject its philosophers into the coding process to ensure the artificial intelligence of the future is hardwired with blue values.
Absolute state loyalty, collectivism, traditionalism.
Exactly. If the AI governs the logistics, the surveillance, and the information flow of the future, whoever controls its foundational values controls reality.
That is staggering. It's the ultimate synthesis of ancient authoritarian philosophy and hypermodern tech. But it's his third point, the ultimatum, that really raises the stakes here.
What does he say?
He claims time has entirely run out. He says the standard military and political bureaucracy must be bypassed immediately to formulate a state-sponsored image of war.
Ah, the image of war. That phrase means the conflict isn't just happening on a battlefield. It's a cognitive structure that every citizen must internalize.
It becomes how they see everything.
It becomes the lens through which all daily life is viewed. The dossier pulls a chilling quote from him to illustrate this.
Let's hear it.
He says, "If we do what we are doing now, either we do it or our enemies succeed. It is one and the same. We are finished."
We are finished. There is absolutely zero middle ground there. It's not, we might face a recession or our geopolitical influence will wane.
It is total erasure.
And that rhetoric of total erasure is highly functional, isn't it?
Oh, extremely. If the public genuinely believes that the alternative to the current path is literal annihilation, they will accept anything.
Domestic hardship, suspension of their rights.
Any centralization of power. Dugin is laying the philosophical stakes that make authoritarianism seem like the only rational choice.
So he's the philosopher laying the groundwork.
Right.
But philosophy needs execution.
Someone has to actually build the thing.
Right. Slide 5 shows an illustration focusing on Andrei Bezrukov, the strategist. The visual is an intense set of concentric circles that looks like a military targeting reticle.
Like looking through a scope.
Yeah. On the outer ring, you have society. Moving inward, the next ring is the army. And at the dead center, the core, is the state, or STVKA, the high command.
And there are warnings on it.
All around these rings are red, blinking warning notes labeled bioweapons and Palantir AI.
Bezrukov's vision is titled Total Societal Mobilization. If Dugin provides the philosophy, Bezrukov provides the operational blueprint.
And his fundamental premise revolves around how the West fights,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. We often hear the boiling frog analogy, but the dossier's analysis of Bezrukov suggests something more insidious. It's less like a boiling frog and more like societal termites.
Societal termites, I like that analogy. Eating the foundation of the house so slowly that everything looks fine until the day the roof suddenly collapses.
Exactly. Bezrukov argues that the West is waging a slow, attritional war of subversion.
What's the goal?
The goal is to destroy critical infrastructure, hollow out the economy, and erode the culture without ever crossing the nuclear threshold.
So because the attack is slow and structural, he defines the horizon of the conflict not in months or years, but in generations.
Yes. The dossier highlights this. He explicitly defines the next 2 generations as strictly warring generations.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Think about that for a second. A child born today is immediately categorized by the state architect as part of a warring generation.
Their entire life is planned out for them.
Their education, their future job, their entire life trajectory is preordained to serve a state of permanent conflict.
It completely erases the concept of a civilian future.
I was trying to think of how to visualize this blueprint he demands. It's like he wants to build a societal submarine.
A submarine.
Yeah, you were taking a nation that was floating on the surface of the global economy, enjoying trade and sunshine, and you were saying, we are under attack, we have to dive, and we have to stay underwater for 40 years.
I see where you're going with this.
So you build a dual-purpose economy where every civilian industry has a military application. You build underground secure infrastructure. And most importantly, you create this STVKA, this high command at the center of the reticle, to entirely bypass slow civilian bureaucracy.
Right, because on a submarine, you don't hold a town hall meeting when there's a leak.
Exactly. The captain's word is law instantly because survival demands it.
That submarine analogy is perfect for understanding the mechanism here. A submarine has no room for pluralism, no room for the orange or green stages of spiral dynamics.
It requires absolute blue stage hierarchy.
And red stage mobilization. And his tactics, as noted in the slide, reflect this ruthlessness. He urges the state to stop being too good to its enemies, implying the necessity of preemptive sabotage against Western infrastructure.
The submarine must be willing to fire its torpedoes before the depth charges drop.
That's his strategy in a nutshell.
So we have the philosophy of erasure, and we have the strategic mobilization of the submarine. But how do you convince the elites and the public to willingly lock themselves inside that submarine?
You need data. You need proof.
Slide 6 shows an illustration, focusing on Konstantin Malafeev. The image looks like a high-tech threat dashboard.
He's the numbers guy.
Yeah. There are 5 glowing server racks, or threat meters, labeled geopolitics, ideology, demography, economy, and tech. They are all glowing, ominously, filled with red and orange warning bars pushing toward the top.
Malafeev's section is called Quantifying the Siege. This is where abstract fear becomes actionable, terrifying data.
How far out is he looking?
The dossier notes his tracking scope maps out 15 existential threats across a 50-year forecastal timeline from the year 2000 to 2050.
He's identifying emerging vectors, right?
Right, like artificial intelligence, replacement migration, and bioweapons as unmitigated new century vulnerabilities.
The most important piece of data on this slide is the ultimate threat. Out of all 15 existential crises he models, the foremost overarching threat identified in his matrix is death in war.
Which naturally leads to his prescription for survival.
Right. If death in war is the ultimate threat, Malafeev says survival necessitates absolute sovereignty and the rapid nationalization of elites.
And we really need to pause and examine the mechanics of that phrase. What does nationalization of elites actually mean in practice?
I wanted to ask you exactly that. What does stripping away Western alignment look like for a ruling class?
It's messy.
We are talking about oligarchs and politicians who traditionally had bank accounts in London, kids in Swiss boarding schools, and villas in Italy.
It means a complete, forcible severing of those ties. To nationalize an elite is to make them entirely fundamentally dependent on the domestic autocracy for their wealth, their status, and their physical safety.
Think about the leverage.
Oh, it's immense. If an oligarch's assets are in a Western bank, their loyalties are divided. They might hesitate to support a war if it means sanctions will freeze their London accounts.
They have something to lose over there.
Right. But if the state forces them to liquidate those foreign assets, pull their kids out of Oxford, and park all their wealth in a state-controlled bank in Moscow.
Suddenly, their survival is intrinsically linked to the regime's survival.
Exactly. If the regime falls, they lose everything. If their assets are solely at the mercy of the Stavikae, their loyalty becomes absolute.
Melitez is using the data of the siege to justify forcing the elites into the submarine, locking the hatch, and demanding they pledge allegiance to the captain.
It's incredible and terrifying how these three figures interlock perfectly.
And that brings us to the timeline they're forcing everyone onto. Slide 7 shows an illustration of a massive, expansive timeline running from 2000 to 2050.
And there's a pivot point, right?
Right in the middle, at the year 2036, there is this massive explosive fork in the road labeled the transfer point.
This is the visual representation of Dugin's ultimatum, the moment where reality splits.
Exactly. From that 2036 explosion, you have two diverging paths. One is an upward glowing blue path labeled the teleology of victory.
And teleology basically means the ultimate design or purpose of something, right?
Right. This path includes milestones, like the annexation of specific territories like Kyiv, Odessa, and Kharkiv, the collapse of the European Union, and ultimately achieving global leadership in security and ideological projection.
It paints a picture of a total, sweeping triumph of their civilizational model.
It does. But the alternative is a downward, fiery red path labeled inertial defeat.
And this isn't just we lost a skirmish enough to pay reparations.
No. This path includes a failed military operation, the total colonization of the Russian state by foreign powers, and absolute U.S. and China global hegemony.
The analytical takeaway on this slide is vital for understanding why this architecture is so dangerous. The dossier states, there is no acceptable status quo. Their rhetoric structurally eliminates the concept of compromise, framing regime survival as an absolute existential binary.
I want the listener to really grasp how this binary framing works. So what does this all mean?
It means diplomacy is dead on arrival.
Yes, if you frame the future this way, diplomacy becomes structurally impossible. You don't negotiate over your own existence.
You can't.
If you genuinely believe the red path means your entire civilization is erased, your culture is colonized, and your state is dismantled, then literally any action, no matter how violent or extreme, is justified to stay on the blue path.
You cannot sit at a negotiating table if you believe the person across from you is mathematically destined to either be your vassal or your executioner.
Precisely. This is how you engineer a mindset for perpetual war. You remove all off-ramps.
You make the conflict existential.
You're convinced the populace that peace is just another word for surrender. And this brings us right back to the first lens of our analytical framework.
The spiral dynamics spring.
Yes, slide 8 shows an illustration, and this is where spiral dynamics is directly applied. The image is actually quite terrifying. It's a swirling, violent vortex.
What's getting sucked into it?
At the top, you see the bright ascending colors of the orange and green memes representing free markets, individualism, human rights, and pluralism. But they are being actively pulled down, sucked into a dark, churning abyss made up of the blue and red memes.
Lens 1 in action. Engineering a societal regression. The dossier breaks this down into three parts: the diagnosis, the goal, and the catalyst.
Let's start with the diagnosis.
The diagnosis is rejection. These architects actively, intentionally reject the orange and green stages of societal development. They view Western tech integration, human rights, and pluralism not as progress, but as a virus that weakens the state.
They don't want to evolve into a green society because they see empathy and individualism as a strategic weakness.
Correct. So the goal is an artificial lock. They are systematically attempting to artificially lock their society into the blue meme,
Which we defined earlier as absolute ideology, state planning, autocracy, and traditional values.
Right. A rigid top-down structure where everyone knows their place, unquestioning obedience is demanded, and a single moral truth is dictated by the state.
But there's a problem with that, isn't there?
A huge problem. The critical issue with trying to hold a modern 21st century society in a blue stage is that it naturally wants to evolve.
People want progress.
Information wants to be free on the internet, markets want to open up to global trade, and people eventually demand individual rights. You can't just tell a modern populace to go back to the Middle Ages.
It's like actively putting a healthy, developing society into a medically induced coma to prevent it from growing up.
That is a highly accurate analogy. But to keep the patient in that coma, to sustain this artificial blue state against the immense natural pressures of modern human development, you need a catalyst.
And the dossier identifies that catalyst.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to continuously inject the raw aggression and survivalism of the red meme.
Conquest, war, absolute power, that's the VKA.
Yes. You use the visceral tribal fear and mobilization of red to freeze the society in blue.
So they use fear to enforce obedience.
You tell the populace, we are surrounded by literal enemies who want to annihilate us right now. Therefore, you must obey the autocrat without question and abandon all desire for individual rights because those rights will get us killed.
The perpetual state of war is the medicine that maintains the coma.
It is the only way the system survives.
Wow. War isn't the failure of diplomacy. It's the required fuel for the social order. And that is exactly where Orwell comes in.
Lens 2.
Slide 9 shows an illustration, and it is an incredibly visceral image. It's an infinity symbol, but it's constructed entirely out of rusty, heavy tank treads and wrapped in barbed wire.
Lens 2, Part A. The Ministry of Peace and the Decades-Long War.
The dossier explicitly draws the 1984 parallel here. In Orwell's framework, the three superstates of the world are in a state of continuous perpetual war.
But the secret of the book, the horrifying truth at its core, is that the war is not meant to be won.
Exactly. It is structurally continuous by design. Its purpose is inward, not outward.
The war serves to destroy surplus goods, keeping the population perpetually on the edge of poverty so they remain dependent.
And it prevents societal advancement.
Right, preventing the evolution into orange or green. And it strictly maintains the domestic social hierarchy. The inner party stays on top because only they possess the authority to navigate the endless crisis.
And the dossier connects this fictional concept directly to the hard evidence we just reviewed.
From the three architects.
Yes. You have Bezrukov openly declaring the state will be at war for a couple of decades and defining generations as strictly warring generations.
You have Dugin demanding the immediate implementation of a permanent state-sponsored image of war to prevent societal collapse.
The facts of the dossier align with the fiction of Orwell almost perfectly.
They are building the Ministry of Peace in real time. They are building a societal machine that consumes human labor, raw materials, and generations of youth to produce nothing but continuous conflict.
Because the conflict is the structural load-bearing pillar of the regime itself. Take away the war, and the blue hierarchy collapses.
But to keep people willingly feeding their lives and their children into that machine, you have to control what they see, hear, and fear.
Slide 10 shows an illustration giving us three volatile, red stock market-style graphs. The data lines are plunging violently downward.
What are the labels?
The graphs are labeled demographic collapse, AI destabilization, and bioweapon proximity.
Lens 2, Part B, the Ministry of Truth and the Paranoia Machine.
The 1984 parallel here is that the party continuously broadcasts reports of new enemy atrocities, impending existential doom, and occasional highly localized production victories to keep everyone off balance.
Think about the psychological impact of that. The goal is to keep the populace hypermobilized, deeply fearful, and entirely dependent on the state for survival.
Think about the last time you logged into social media and saw an impending crisis trending. Your heart rate goes up, you feel a sense of dread, you want someone to fix it.
Now imagine that feeling of panic being intentionally engineered by your government.
Every single day to ensure you never question their authority.
Yeah.
That is what Malafia's data dashboard, those 15 overlapping cataclysmic existential threats, is designed to do.
The dossier highlights the narrative function of this engineered paranoia. The enemy is at the gates, therefore we must unite.
This is how you legitimize totalitarian autocracy.
Let's look at the mechanics of legitimacy for a second. In an orange or green society, a government is legitimized by providing prosperity, freedom, and happiness.
If the economy tanks, you vote them out.
Exactly. But in this artificially locked blue-red state, the government doesn't have to make you rich or happy. It is legitimized by simply keeping you alive for one more day against an endless tide of manufactured horrors.
It is the sheer math of survival. We may not have human rights, our economy might be entirely devoted to making artillery shells, but at least the bioweapons haven't hit us yet, thanks to the Stauge.
Precisely. The threat must be constant and terrifying for the power to remain absolute.
Which means you have to go a step further. You can't just control the news, you have to control how people even talk about reality.
Linguistic engineering.
Yes. Slide 11 shows an illustration, and this is a stark clinical table labeled linguistic engineering, the new lexicon. It compares their lexicon, the terms used by the architects, to the 1984 context.
This raises an important question, and it's a core Orwellian concept.
Mhm.
How does changing the words a society uses fundamentally limit the thoughts its citizens are capable of having?
Right. If you don't have the words to describe freedom, how do you organize a rebellion to demand it?
You can't. Let's decode these terms.
Okay, let's trade off on these and really look at the mechanics of how they work. The first term in their lexicon is nationalization of elites. We talked about this with Malofy of seizing assets.
In the 1984 context, the dossier translates this as the elimination of independent thought and enforcing strict, absolute loyalty to the inner party.
So they become functionaries.
Yes. You don't have independent elites capable of funding an opposition movement. You have functionaries of the state who manage wealth on the autocrat's behalf.
Next term, merging army and society. This was Bezrukov's vision of the submarine.
The 1984 translation, totalitarian militarization of daily life. The complete erasure of the civilian sphere.
There is no space outside the state's military objective.
None. A teacher isn't just teaching math. They are preparing a warring generation for the front lines.
Then we have de-Westernization.
In Orwellian terms, this is crime stop. This is the forced eradication of competing ideologies.
How do you physically prevent a competing ideology from taking root in the internet era?
You ban the platforms, you rewrite the history books, you criminalize the use of certain words. If a concept comes from the West, like pluralism or individual dignity, it is literally framed as a crime to harbor it in your mind.
The state engineers a reflex, where citizens instinctively stop themselves from thinking unapproved thoughts.
Exactly.
And finally, autocracy legitimation.
The Big Brother protocol, formalizing and legally codifying unquestionable centralized authority.
The leader is not a politician subject to review.
No, they are the infallible, mystical manifestation of the state's will to survive.
It's chilling to see it laid out like a translation dictionary. It strips away the political jargon and reveals the bare machinery of control.
It's all connected.
And you really see how these three architects have built different pieces of the same machine. Slide 12 shows an illustration that brings them all together. It's a synthesis matrix, a master grid that places Dugin, Bezrukov, and Malfiev side by side.
This is a brilliant summation by the dossier's authors. It takes everything we've discussed and maps the architecture perfectly.
Let's run through it. First, Dugin. His role as the philosopher. His spiral dynamic stage is blue-purple, mythic, and dogmatic.
And his 1984 role.
His 1984 system role is the inner party ideologue. And his core weapon is ontological warfare and philosophy. He fights to define what reality is.
Then Bezrukov, the strategist. His spiral stage is pure red power and survivalism.
What's his Orwellian role?
His 1984 role is the Ministry of Peace Commander. His core weapon is total societal mobilization and sabotage. He provides the kinetic energy, the violence, and the structural command of the submarine.
And finally, Malafif, the quantifier. His spiral stage is orange utilizing blue.
He's engaging in strategic traditionalism.
Right, using the modern tools of data, forecasting, and finance to enforce old world values. His 1984 role is the Ministry of Truth statistician. His core weapon is data manipulation and threat forecasting to maintain the paranoia.
The synergy is dark but undeniable. You need the philosophy to justify the regression, the strategy to execute the physical mobilization, and the data to terrify the public into accepting it without question.
Which brings us to the final terrifying product of this architecture. Slide 13 shows an illustration, and it is the ultimate visual of this entire deep dive.
What is it?
It's a glowing blue panopticon, a massive, circular, futuristic fortress. And from the watchtower in the center, it is projecting a massive sweeping searchlight out over a dark map.
The inevitable conclusion. The fortress state.
The dossier lays out the vision. The combined output of Dugin, Bezrukov, and Malofiev creates the blueprint for a technologically armed, philosophically isolated fortress state.
Let's really look at the profound irony in the dark strategy here. The strategy box on this slide explains that they are weaponizing the most modern analytical tools, massive data forecasting, AI threat modeling, algorithmic surveillance.
They are using the absolute peak of orange stage technological advancement.
Yes, but they are weaponizing those future-facing tools for the sole purpose of actively justifying and enforcing an archaic, rigid, authoritarian blue societal model.
They're using the tools of the future to lock humanity in the past.
Their ultimate objective is to freeze the populace in a state of perpetual mobilization, ensuring permanent regime survival under the guise of existential defense.
The Panopticon's searchlight isn't just looking outward for foreign enemies, is it?
No, it's looking inward, illuminating every corner of society to ensure every citizen remains in their prescribed place within the fortress walls.
Because if the war ever ends, the fortress loses its purpose and the architects lose their power.
Exactly. The fortress requires the siege.
Which brings us to the end of the dossier. Slide 14 shows an illustration. And because this is the capstone, it serves as a visual representation of everything we've just discussed, the grand synthesis.
Bringing it all together.
Imagine merging the sweeping radar from Slide 1 with the impenetrable panopticon fortress of Slide 13. It's an image of a state constantly, obsessively searching for external threats to justify the massive, inescapable walls it has built around its own people.
The general conclusion drawn strictly from this source material is profoundly sobering.
What's the main takeaway?
The architecture of perpetual war, as modeled by Dubin, Bezrukov, and Malofev, is ultimately about inward control as much as it is about outward defense.
The external existential threats, whether they are real, manufactured, or intentionally exaggerated, are the necessary fuel.
They are the raw red energy required to artificially lock the society into a regressive, easily controllable blue state.
It structurally eliminates compromise because peace destroys the mechanism of control.
It redefines reality through linguistic engineering, erasing concepts like human rights or pluralism, so citizens literally lack the vocabulary to dissent.
And most importantly, it guarantees that the regime survives by ensuring the war never, ever actually ends. The architecture is designed to be a perfectly closed loop. A perfectly closed loop. An infinity symbol made of tank shreds. Well, we have reached the end of the blueprint.
There's a lot to process.
It really is. I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this intense and highly analytical journey. We've thrown a lot of complex theory at you today, from spiral dynamics to Orwellian matrices to ontological warfare.
But hopefully this shows the immense value of looking at information through structured frameworks.
When you apply these lenses, you stop just hearing the angry rhetoric on the news, and you start seeing the cold architecture beneath it. You start seeing the gears turning.
And as we close this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder, drawn directly from the implications of this source material.
Leave us with something to think about.
We usually think of technological advancement as a liberating force, something that naturally leads to more freedom and more connection.
Right.
But if a ruling elite can successfully use the most advanced technologies of tomorrow, like AI paradigm control and massive algorithmic data forecasting, to intentionally freeze a society in the dogmatic authoritarian ideologies of the past, does technology actually drive human progress, or does it simply amplify the intent of whoever controls the algorithms?
It really makes you wonder. When you look at a blueprint for the future, whose reality are you actually building? Until next time, keep diving deep.